So my name's Diane, and yeah, this is my garden, which is my passion. Yeah, my absolute love, and always has been, I think, since I was a little girl. Yeah, so we moved to Eureka Park 22, nearly 23 years ago. This was just bush, lots of lantana covering the trees. The trees were all here. And yeah, we moved onto the plot and I started landscaping. And yeah, so my whole aim is to have kept most of the trees. We only took out very few trees where we built. And over the years, new young trees have come up and we've let them grow, and we've actually added a few, but have stuck with indigenous. There's a handful of non-indigenous trees, but majority are indigenous.
Yeah, I see this large acacia here.
Yes, it's a beautiful
and
acacia.
And this is a Natal mahogany?
Natal mahogany, we planted this one. And we planted quite a few of them because they're evergreen. The acacias, yeah, the acacias lose their leaves now in winter. So do the Albizia versicolor, which is another lovely indigenous tree with a huge canopy. But yeah, they lose their leaves, and the unfortunate thing is they only get their new leaves towards the end of October, which is our hottest time of the year. So you go through that hot season with lots of sun. So I added in mostly Natal mahoganies because they're evergreen, and they're easy. The roots don't damage, like if you've got structures or septic tanks or anything near, the roots don't cause any damage. The birds love them. They get very pretty seeds and attract birds. And so because I've kept the trees and kept the majority of trees, it obviously creates a very shady garden. So I've planted shade-loving plants in all the shade areas. And of course the advantage with shade gardens is they don't use nearly as much water as full sun.
Right.
Yeah. Here in the shade, okay, I've got busy lizzies, your very common impatiens or busy lizzies, which grow literally like weeds. And they're always bright and cheerful and have always got flowers on them, even now in the middle of winter, and they just pop up, their seeds drop and they pop up. They're very handy in the shade.
And they're so easy to grow or even propagate, yeah.
So what I've done in the shade, because not many plants flower in the shade, I use colored leaves. And I'm sure if you just glance around my garden, even in the sun areas, you'll see the different combinations of color. Okay. So over here, I've got cordylines and dracaenas. There's a bright pink little cordyline, the wine red one, more red ones, green ones. The green ones get lovely red berries.
And I love how, you know, just in terms of structure, they all have a similar structure, leaf shape and stuff. So it comes out like a
cordylines together. Yeah, and then ground covers, and so also the other
even
thing
this lovely syngonium.
Yes, that's a new pink syngonium where the leaves come out pink. There are the variegated ones, and there's almost a white silvery one I've got somewhere else in the garden. Yeah, and then the other thing is all my flower beds, the soil is pretty much covered, because if you've got exposed soil, it's just going to dry out. It's the way I plant, there literally is no empty soil to see. So yeah.
So basically the leaves provide shade for the ground.
Yes.
And so you don't get the direct sun beating down on it.
Yes. Yeah, and then of course the other important thing with trees, besides them giving shade, is that they drop leaves. And yes, a lot of us curse the leaves, you know, oh, we've got to rake, we've got to pick up all the leaves. But so in the flower beds, we try and just leave the leaves to sit in the flower beds. And then the lawn, we do rake, but then they go onto our compost. So everything that drops goes back into the soil at some point. If you don't have enough trees, you're not going to have enough organic material to make compost. So yeah, that's another reason why you need
a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in here we've got golden fern. I've got a few different ferns. That's a giant maidenhair fern in there, and I think this is called a silver brake fern. So yeah, just a few different ferns. I love these shrubs. This one's common name is actually a chocolate bush.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the pink pseudoranthemum. You also get variegated varieties. You'll see in here I've got a Natal mahogany musakili tree we actually planted there because I'm a bit worried about the monkey bread. The monkey breads and the acacias don't live all that long. Acacias are about 40 years max. Yeah, so I've planted a musakili.
So how old is this musakili?
Probably 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the plan is that it will replace this one?
Yes. If I won't take this one out, but if it does die, then there's something else coming up in its place.
All right. So you're not worried if it's growing slowly? You just
no,
its time will come, basically.
Yes. They take a while in the beginning, and then they suddenly get their roots into the good soil, and off they go. Yeah, so
I think that's a very interesting thing that you're speaking about, because a lot of people might not think about it in terms of succession planning. If you're in your garden for a long time, how do you make sure you always have trees? Because trees do die.
Yes.
And it takes forever, you know, to get them to this size.
I don't even want to think about this tree dying.
This is the center of the entire garden.
It is, you know, it's such a feature. So yeah, there's a few like that are such a feature that I really don't want you to think about it. What we have noticed is with the irrigation is if the irrigation goes up against the trunks, I think it causes Phytophthora, which is a fungus.
Okay.
So we can't actually stop the irrigation against the tree. But the trees that are in the flower beds, because they get much smaller, they don't actually get the irrigation straight onto their trunks, actually seem to do better.
Okay, so avoiding direct watering onto the tree or the tree trunks.
If you can, yes. And the other thing is those trimmers, you know, for trimming the edge of the lawn, they kill trees.
Yeah.
People don't realize it. I've actually got a guava tree, we might see it later on, that was completely ring-barked by a strimmer. So I have banned my guys from using strimmers around trees. They have to use manual cutters, because you can ring bark a tree without realizing it.
And once you damage that bark.
Yes. Yeah, so that is another thing. You've got to protect the bark of the trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So back to this bed. So we've got golden fern here. It's a golden Boston fern. Sometimes people think it's sick because it's pale, but it's actually made like that to be gold. And then you've got the gold, and I've put the dark green next to it. I don't know what this fern is called. I just call it rabbit's foot fern because it's got a bit of a foot that crawls along and it just keeps spreading.
I've heard it referred to as rabbit's foot as well.
Yeah. So that's Aspidistra cast iron plant, which does very well in the shade. There's more in there. This is a variegated ginger. Which I just love.
And how did you come to your selection of plants? Was it trial and error, or?
So a lot of the plants, I think, come from KZN, Natal, or I know them from KZN. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
And they like humidity. So Zambia is quite a difficult climate because you have a very wet, rainy season and very humid. And then you have a very dry season. So you've got two totally opposites. So it's quite difficult. But in a shady garden, the tropical plants do better. So what plants that like humidity do not like is the hot, dry air. And often that's where people go wrong. They want to just sort of put more and more water on the plants, whereas what the plants actually want is humidity, just that moisture in the air. So because we've got automatic irrigation in the beds, in the hot, dry weather, we switch it on for literally 5 minutes, and it just picks up the humidity. So you know, you don't need the water on the roots at that point. I mean, obviously maybe once a week, a good soaking. And then just the humidity, just a bit of a humidity boost.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to see the little ecosystem you have, because you can see the plants are quite, you know, living quite happily together.
Yes,
complementing each other. And also the one thing I do like, or the one thing I have noticed, is the layers you have in your garden.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just trees and some beds. There's so much dimension to how you've shaped it.
Yeah, so I think my beds, what I did when we first moved in here, so I literally collected a nursery of plants and had them here under the trees, and then I kind of used the trees to shape the beds. So I like my beds to be natural, to follow a natural shape, natural curves. So I've kind of followed the shade of the trees in most of the places.
What is this? This looks very interesting.
This one?
Vivid green leaves.
Yeah, it's a canthus. I think it's called a canthus mollis or wild rhubarb. Yeah, it's being a little bit eaten at the moment, but it's just a seasonal thing. I think it gets a bit of a fungus now in winter and gets a little bit chewed. But I'll just cut evergreen? Those. Yes, it's evergreen. I'll just cut the damaged leaves off and you can see all the new ones coming. Yeah.
And I love how it contrasts that deep green with the white of the syngonium,
so I've got
the pale white.
Syngonium. And then there's a burgundy ajuga there. The shrimp plant, I've got quite a few different colors of shrimp plant. They almost always have flowers on them. And then this is a flax. I think they call it a New Zealand flax. Formium, I'm not too sure of the name. Formium, yeah. So that is a feature plant. So in landscaping, you need some feature plants because, like, if you look at the sort of overall bed, there's just lots of different shrubs and round plants and whatever. But every now and then you need a striking feature plant. So I've put the flax on the end of the bed. It's a feature, and I guess the strelitzia is a bit of a feature, draws your eye. And then also the other thing with landscaping, if you've got a big enough garden, but you can actually do it even in a small garden, is to create interest. You shouldn't actually see the whole garden in one glance. So the way I've done it is I've put some beds so that it encourages you to go around and see what's behind that bed. If you're needing to do it on a smaller scale, you can actually just have a biggish plant or shrub. If you don't have space to put a whole bed, you put a biggish plant or shrub, which encourages you to then walk around that shrub to see what's on the other side.
Yeah, I've heard something similar in terms of garden rooms. Like literally, you move into a physically different like garden design,
so
and stuff like that.
Around,
but just encouraging you to explore, as opposed to because. I think a lot of people actually don't go out into their gardens.
No.
They sit on the veranda because they can see everything from the veranda.
Yes.
Whereas here, you know, to appreciate what's at the back, you have to come and then you see this huge clump of ginger.
Yes. Yeah.
And this just diversity of leaf shapes, leaf colors.
Yeah.
I can see huge splash of red there.
Yes.
And then you have the
very dark green. There's the
dark
golden
green at the bottom.
This is mondo grass, which is lovely in the shade, and dogs love it. Dogs love to lie on it, especially in the hot weather. And it doesn't actually squash, so you know, as long as they're not running through it every day.
I've heard this referred to as a good lawn alternative because it's quite water-wise. So if you have a small garden, and you don't want
to get the miniature one, so that's great, and it's great between pavers. Yeah.
So that's definitely something I would encourage people to try in their beds or as a grass if you have a small courtyard. Oh wow, and then we come into this open space
so this is a lot more full sun area.
Okay.
So it does use a bit more water. But you do also need some full sun.
Oh yeah.
So this is definitely more a sunny bed. There's the red flag, which I love. That's quite a nice sort of feature shrub just on its own. Yeah, the red one, and you do also get the white one, and you get a lovely pale pink one. I don't actually.
This is actually quite interesting. Sorry, if I could have a look.
Yeah,
because this actually looks like the leaves of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Are these the leaves? Because it's very hard to distinguish.
Yeah, I think it is just a leaf because the whatever it is that the gets pollinated is in there. That's the actual flower. So it's just, I don't know if it's like an adapted leaf to attract the pollinators. So,
and I must say, you have a lot of plants in your garden.
Yes.
I know it's been 20 years, but just in terms of the number of, how did it cost a lot? What did you do to get around some of the cost?
Firstly, I ran a garden centre in Ndola. So,
so you had the plants?
Yes. And so I was always looking for new plants. At that stage, we used to go to Zimbabwe and bring in new stock of plants. And then I've got my own greenhouses, so we grow pretty much all our own plants. There's a few things that we struggle with, but generally we just keep planting. So if I want to add a new bed, or I want to change something in a bed, or if something gets damaged or old, then I've got the greenhouse, I've got my stock, and I just get from there.
I think actually that's a very good tip for people who have a new space they want to fill in, you know, before you get there, start propagating your plants, because this is hundreds of thousands of plants that you have in this space.
It is. And the thing is, when we clean out the beds, because obviously everything needs a bit of grooming from time to time. Things get big and they lose shape. Or what happens in beds like this is, to keep it landscaped, you've got to keep things in their place. And a lot of people don't understand that. They let a mango tree come up in there and a guava tree come up in there, and whereas they actually need to be moved or taken out. And then also certain plants will encroach on the others. So I teach my guys, this fern needs to stay in this area. You mustn't let it spread and cover all the others. And then with doing that, you're always removing plants. So you're cutting back, or you're actually pulling out or digging out. So you've got all these plants. So we just keep planting them into the greenhouse. And then again, with making our own compost, all I use in the greenhouse is our compost. I know potting soil, they say, is supposed to be 1/3 river sand, 1/3 compost, and 1/3 pine bark, or a bark. But we just use straight compost, and it works fine. Very well.
I think for root development, something with good aeration, you know, that allows, that's quite porous, and compost works for that, and is highly nutritious. So it does make a lot of sense.
So we don't sieve our compost very fine. So it does have some bits and pieces of bark and stick and whatever in. But it's actually quite good like that, because even digging it back into the beds, it creates a bit of, it loosens the soil and, you know, keeps the soil aerated.
And I think that's exactly what you need for living soil, you know, because then your worms can live in there, your fungi can grow. And then you come into almost another garden. I love this. What is this?
This is a Sanchesia. Very easy to grow. They grow very easily in the shade. They like the shade, actually prefer shade to sun. I love them because they grow fast. They're very easy to trim because they're soft. So you're not getting scratched by thorns and hard branches, and they're just easy to cut. And then the new leaves come out with a lot more color. It hasn't really, the younger ones. So the young leaves, and then the flowers are very pretty as well. So
lovely.
Yeah, I really love them. And you can see from the type of flower, they would attract probably sunbirds, because they'd come up
the long narrow stem.
The nectar, and that is the other advantage with a garden with a huge variety of plants, is the different birds. We have such a huge variety of birds, and it has increased over the years that we've been here, and we are seeing more and more exotic, different. We've even had the Narina Trojan, I think it is, in our garden. We spotted him once. He's very shy, but the most beautiful bird, and it's not seen very often in Zambia at all, and we've had one in our garden. Quite a few other rare birds. In a way it's a little bit sad, because they're obviously moving in because their habitats are being destroyed elsewhere. But we've got a huge range of habitats just on this 10 acres, because we've got our shady garden with all the various plants for pollen and seeds and all the different fruits that the birds like. And then next door on our plot, we've got our bush meander, which is completely indigenous. We don't irrigate it at all, and we actually have a different variety of birds that go there. So we've got the whole spectrum.
But I do like what you say, because there is the whole idea of just creating islands or sanctuaries for insects, birds,
creatures,
small animals,
bush babies. We have genet cats. We have giant rats, the African giant rat. Lots of them. They can be a bit of a pest, but we just let them carry on. They dig great big tunnels under the plants. And then the bird life. So the birds and the animals, I think, like the sort of environment where there's a lot of thick bush. They can easily hide. So our dogs might chase the birds every now and then. They don't kill them. Layla has a game with the wagtails. They come and tease her, and that's what they're doing now. So they chase them, but the birds know that they can escape to somewhere, so they're perfectly happy. And the genet cats and the bush babies all know that they are safe here. So it's because there's place for them to hide.
That's so funny. Look at that. I think the birds are teasing them. They're not really, but
what I've done with all our houses on the property is I don't like just walls around the house or just a hedge. So I've created beds, and they're quite thick beds, and then with lots of tall shrubs.
And it provides an effective screen.
Yes. So it's nice and natural. I mean, you can just see birds everywhere. And then I have put some walls, but I've kind of just mixed them because I don't want just walls.
A solid
because they're
wall.
hot and they're hard looking, and yeah.
And I think even the tenants themselves would appreciate the openness that this gives them.
It gives you the feeling that you're not
kind of joins
in.
all the gardens together.
Yeah.
And creates lots of shared spaces.
Yeah, so it's literally houses with their own gardens and then set in a park situation, really. Yeah, and everybody can come, you know, they've got the privacy of their own gardens, but they come out and they wander around through the whole 10 acres.
And who does the maintenance? Your guys come in and maintain, or they bring?
We pretty much do our own. So we've got Douglas, who's our driver and maintenance guy. My husband is very hands-on, but he works full-time at the company, but he teaches Douglas my husband's very electrical. He's an electrical engineer. Okay. So, but he's into everything. He's over the years.
I mean, you don't just have a place like this without knowing something.
Yeah. Oh no, believe me, it's constant maintenance. So yeah, the only time we call in companies is for the generator and for the air cons, you know, where it's very specialized. But otherwise we pretty much do our own maintenance.
Do you know the name of this? Sorry, do you know the name of this?
It's called Hoffmania. Funny name.
Look at this, the velvety leaves. Can you see this? How it shines.
I don't know what is under this tree, whether it comes from the tree, but so many things I plant under this tree get eaten. So there was one of these over there outside by the trampoline, and there was nothing eating it. But yeah, it's lovely the way it's got the red under the leaf as well. So like as it blows or in the sun, the red sort of shines through. Very pretty, just very tropical shrub. And there's the yellow poinsettia flowering now.
Oh, I didn't know there was a yellow one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you definitely can't go to a garden center in one trip and come up with all these plants.
No.
This has been decades of collecting and propagating.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the bush meander.
So what is the idea behind the bush meander?
So here we don't irrigate. We've just left it completely wild, so that the trees, because it worries us a bit, you know, with irrigating trees, that they don't really like that. It's not their natural way, and so we might not get the trees regenerating enough. When you walk through here in the rainy season and then you walk through in the dry season, it is completely different. In the rainy season, you literally can't see, you know, through here. It's all just thick, lush, like grasses, low, lush green grasses. Yeah, now it's a bit dry, but huge amount of bird life and hopefully lots of trees regenerating.
And I think we spoke about biodiversity, and I think that's one of the things in terms of our indigenous plants provide food to indigenous species. Because there's insects and birds that pretty much evolved to feed off certain plants. So if we only have exotic gardens with lawns, there's a lot of native wildlife, some we don't even know yet, that will just die away slowly. There's
such a variety of trees on this plot, it's incredible. And I'm guessing that's why there's such a variety of birds.
You know, indigenous planting, indigenous gardens can also be a feature. You know, people go and they pay $200 to go sleep overnight at a safari lodge, so they can get this view.
So we have our little cottage there where we have on Airbnb. And so this is right next to it too. So
they can enjoy.
People that are from outside Zambia can come and experience the indigenous. Because I do have a lot of people saying to me, why don't you grow an indigenous garden? But to grow indigenous in Zambia all year through, I mean, this is what you would have now. And for me, it's just you know, I don't like dust, and I want to walk barefoot on the lawn and just just that sort of comfort. I suppose that's what I've grown up with. And
I mean, there are some indigenous plants that flower, but I don't think the industry is big enough yet that you'd be able to find things that are like in flower all year round.
Yeah, and you know, so like in South Africa, especially on the coast, you can grow an indigenous garden because you get a bit of rain. Your rainy season might be the hot season or over December, whatever, but you'll get the odd shower through the year. So things stay green. So even if you don't have lawn, you've still got green. But in Zambia, because it's such a harsh climate and it's the very wet rainy season and the very hot dry, it's, you know, the two total opposites, you just can't have that. So it's quite difficult to, you know, I mean, I accept it when I go to Luangwa or Lower Zambezi, whatever, I accept this is what it's like. But I couldn't live with it, you know, around my house all the time. But it's nice to just
see a nice little patch here. You see.
So there's our beehive.
There you go.
Which we need to establish if it's got honey.
Do you do anything special for the bees, like water or whatever, or they fend for themselves?
Yeah. I think they would find water fairly close by because we irrigate around. I've got quite a lot of indigenous orchids around. I don't go and collect them in the bush, but I had a friend whose husband was working on a new huge farm that they were developing up near Solwezi, and they literally just chopped down all these trees and they all had orchids on. So she brought me this whole range of orchids and said, please
keep them
try
alive
and save them. So I've put them all over. I put lots through here. And we just watered them the first few months that I got them, and then the rains came, and I thought, okay, so now after the rains they should be settled.
No, it's doing really well. You can see that it's
latched on already.
Yeah, it's taken
so I
to
put
the
them kind of at this height because that's where the irrigation reaches them. Because I think up, you know, Solwezi way is a lot more humidity and moisture in the forests than what we get here. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ones, and I've just put them all around, and I just figured if I can just save them.